The story begins on a quiet Friday afternoon in Doha, when the sun was still friendly enough to let families gather around the Corniche, and the sea glimmered like a polished sheet of glass. Qatar weekends are always filled with live Filipino. Families grilling fish and hot dogs over portable grills, Indian families laying out mats, Arab kids running around with footballs, and workers from every corner of the world trying to forget the weight of their week. But that day, no one knew that something extraordinary was about to unfold. No one knew that a Filipino lifeguard would perform something so unbelievable that even emergency responders later said, "We still don't know how he did that." His name was Mark, 32 years old, from Iloilo, with 10 years of experience as a pool and beach lifeguard in Qatar. He wasn't the kind of hero people noticed. He didn't have a six-pack, he wasn't tall, and he didn't walk around with the confidence of someone who saved lives for a living. Instead, he looked like a normal Pinoy brown skin, slightly sunburnt, a gentle smile, and a face that always seemed a little tired but still kind. He worked at a private resort near Lusail, but on his days off, he volunteered unofficially along the Corniche. Everyone knew him, especially the families that visited regularly. He wasn't paid, but he said one thing repeatedly: "Pag may nakita ako na kailangan ng tulong, hindi kayo pwedeng bilbilin." That Friday, Mark was taking what he called his quiet hour. He sat on a folding chair under a cheap umbrella, sipping cold water from a big blue jug. The sea was calm. Kids were laughing. A group of Filipino construction workers were singing karaoke on a portable speaker. A Qatari father was teaching his little son how to float on salt water. Everything was peaceful until the wind changed. Experienced lifeguards know that calm seas can turn unpredictable fast. When wind pressure shifts, waves change rhythm. Currents deepen. The surface can still look safe while the bottom becomes dangerous. Mark noticed it immediately. The sound of the waves changed from soft rolling to a sharper hiss. He stood up, not fully alarmed yet, just vigilant. Then he heard it, not a scream, not a splash, just a strange kind of silence like laughter suddenly interrupted. He scanned the water and saw 6 children, 3 Arab, 2 Indian, and 1 Filipino floating farther out than they had been a minute earlier. At first, he thought they were just playing. Kids sometimes drift while splashing around. But then he saw their body language change. 2 of them stopped kicking. 1 waved in panic. 1 started to go vertical, a sign that energy was running out. And the smallest child disappeared beneath the surface. Mark's heart dropped. There's something that happens to trained lifeguards when danger appears. The world becomes quiet. Every distraction fades. The brain enters a state of calculation: distance, current strength, number of victims, rescue options. But the moment he saw the smallest child sink, calculation became instinct. He kicked off his slippers. He sprinted across the sand, his feet burning from the heat. The parents of the children hadn't even noticed yet. The area was busy, and no one realized 6 kids were being pulled by a lateral current toward deeper water. Mark didn't shout. He didn't waste time. He dove into the water headfirst, slicing the surface cleanly. His training told him one thing: reach the smallest child first, because kids under 10 have less than 1 minute before losing consciousness underwater. The current surprised even him. It was stronger than he expected. The water tugged his legs sideways and tried to pull him off track, but he used a diagonal swim pattern to cut across it. He saw a flash of a small hand underwater, then a shape sinking. He pushed harder, lungs tightening, arms slicing forward. He reached the little Filipino boy first, grabbed him by the chest, lifted him up, and tapped his back. The boy coughed violently and cried. Mark placed him on his rescue buoy, but the other 5 children were still fighting the water, further away. That was the moment he realized the real danger. They were caught in a rip current. A rip current is not like waves pulling you backward. It's a narrow but extremely strong channel of fast-moving water that drags swimmers away from shore. Even adults panic in rip currents. Even trained swimmers fail to escape them. And these 6 children were small, tired, and terrified. Mark knew he couldn't bring the rescued boy back to shore yet. If he took him back, the other 5 would drown before he returned. He had to secure the first boy and push forward. He strapped the child firmly to the buoy and told him, Hiwag Kam Bai Batak hit and on Manjari. The boy nodded through tears. Then Mark turned toward the others. By now, parents had noticed something was wrong. Screams filled the air. People pointed. Someone shouted for help. But no one had the skill to swim into a rip current without being pulled under themselves. Mark swam toward the next child, a girl kicking wildly, her head bobbing under the water every few seconds. He grabbed her from behind, positioned her chin upward, and attached her to the buoy too. Now he had two. But he still had 4 children drifting farther and farther into open water. His muscles were burning. His breathing was heavy. But he refused to let panic creep in. A lifeguard panicking is worse than a victim panicking. He took a deep breath and pushed forward again. The third child was an Indian boy, almost unconscious. Mark reached him just as he slipped underwater. He lifted him, tapped his back, and gave 2 rescue breaths. The boy sputtered awake. 3 attached to the buoy now. But the buoy was becoming heavy. 6 children would be too much for one flotation device. Mark needed to improvise. He unclipped a rope from the buoy and wrapped it around his waist like a harness, turning himself into a human anchor. He swam to the 4th child, an Arab girl who was frozen in fear, barely moving. He grabbed her gently and reassured her with the calmest voice he could muster. "I got you. You're safe." She clung to him like he was the only solid thing in the world. He tied her to the side of the rope, but the current dragged all of them farther out. Mark felt the exhaustion creeping in. 6 children. 1 Filipino lifeguard. A rip current strong enough to drag full-grown adults. And now the shoreline looked distant, blurred by sunlight. He called out to a man nearby. "Throw anything that floats." Someone threw a cooler. Someone threw a plastic drum. 2 teenagers brought a second buoy. Everything helped. Mark grabbed the floating cooler and lashed it to the rope, giving the kids a second surface to hold on to. The 5th child was now almost 25 meters away, kicking weakly. Mark pushed through the water again, arms aching, vision blurry. He reached the boy, lifted him, dragged him back to the floating line of rescued children, and added him to the makeshift raft. Only 1 child left. This one was drifting the fastest, an Arab boy around 8 years old. He wasn't screaming. He wasn't splashing. He was just floating on his back, staring at the sky. What lifeguards call passive drowning. No movement. No fight. No energy left. Mark knew this was the last stage before sinking. He pushed forward with everything he had left. His legs cramped. His arms felt like stone. But he kept going. He remembered his mother's voice in his head. "Anak, kapag kaya mong tumulong tulong ka. Hindi layak kaya gawin yan." With one final surge, he reached the boy, turned him over, checked his breathing shallow but alive, and pressed his forehead gently. "You're safe now," he whispered. He dragged him back to the others, tied him to the rope, and finally signaled for the crowd to pull. Dozens of men rushed into the water, forming a human chain. They grabbed the rope, the cooler, the buoy, the kids, anything they could reach. They pulled with all their strength while waves slapped against their legs. Mark stayed at the back, pushing and guiding, refusing to leave until every child's feet touched sand. One by one, all 6 children reached shallow water. Parents collapsed around them, crying, thanking God, holding their kids tightly. Emergency responders arrived minutes later, checking each child. All survived, all stable. One needed oxygen, one had mild shock, but all 6 lived. And the Filipino lifeguard who did the impossible? He stood there, chest heaving, hands shaking from exhaustion, sunburn deepening on his face. Someone tried to interview him on video. Someone tried to take selfies. A Qatari father hugged him so tightly, he almost lifted him off the ground. But Mark simply said, "Trabaho lang po." And kat day off ko trabo kayo per rin tumulong. The Coast Guard later said, a normal rescue is 1 or 2 people. Saving 6 without losing anyone. That's unheard of, a Qatari official asked him. "How did you do it?" Mark smiled shyly. "You don't count how many. You just save who you can." His story spread across Doha in days. Families shared it on WhatsApp groups. Filipino communities posted about him on Facebook. And without asking for recognition, without expecting anything, Mark went back to work the next day quietly, humbly, as though he hadn't just saved 6 children from the sea. But the parents of the rescued children found him again the following weekend. They brought food, gifts, handwritten letters, and one Qatari elder gave him a small gold necklace shaped like an anchor. "This is not for decoration," the elder said. "This is for remembrance. You became the anchor for our children when the sea tried to take them." Mark didn't know what to say. He had never owned gold in his life. But the best part came a week later when the smallest Filipino boy, the first child he saved, walked up to him holding a drawing. It showed a stick figure with a red buoy, 6 kids holding onto ropes, and big letters written in shaky handwriting. "Kuya Mark, my hero." Mark kept that drawing in his locker, protected by a plastic folder, for the rest of his years in Qatar. He never became famous outside the community. He never asked for rewards. He never asked for titles. But in that moment on that beach, in that dangerous current, under that burning Doha sun, a Filipino lifeguard saved 6 children at once and proved again the quiet truth the world keeps learning over and over. When everything is falling apart, when danger is rising, when lives are on the line, there is always a Filipino who will step forward and say, "Ako na. I'll help."